Good morning. Welcome to the final hearing of the Subcommittee on Chemical Safety, Waste Management, Environmental Justice, and Regulatory Oversight in the 117th Congress. And to Ranking Member Wicker and the rest of the committee members, I appreciate your work and partnership over these last 2 years as we've examined a number of issues important to people here in the United States. And now we're looking at another issue, the issue of plastics. I'm going to ask my team to hold up. Well, I'll have them hold up first this photo, which I took when I was out jogging along the Anacostia River. The river is just choked with plastic. And I took some other pictures when I was running on the Potomac after a high tide event, and the entire running trail is covered with millions of pieces of little tiny pieces of plastic. It's what we would never see, except the river overflowed onto the running trail, and when the water receded, it left this deposit. And on the day I was undertaking this marathon along the Potomac, there were people out there on teams, and they were picking up each little tiny bit of plastic because they were trying to separate them from all the leaves and all the grass and everything else. And in the time that I was running the marathon and went down the Potomac and came back, like each volunteer in a couple hours had cleared like a 2 square foot section trying to pick all these little tiny bits out. All these millions of bits that would have been washed in the ocean or are washed in on every other hour of every other day. And another reason for us holding this hearing, I'll have them hold up the other poster here, is that we have an emerging problem of microplastics. And plastics don't really degrade. They break down into tinier and tinier pieces. And we are now seeing that these plastics are everywhere. It's in the, well, as the headline says, the baby poop is loaded with microplastics. Antarctic, far away, has microplastics. Human breast milk has plastics. So we find them deep in the lungs of living people. And what we know is that plastics are loaded with thousands of chemicals with different effects, and that those chemicals are not even disclosed to the public. So here we have thousands of chemicals deep in our lungs, in our breast milk, in our consumption, and we don't really understand all the effects of those chemicals, but it's certainly a cause for concern, and that's why we're holding this hearing. It's my sense that plastics may well pose a very significant risk to human health. I'm struck by the fact that it's estimated that each of us consumes in our food and in the air we breathe, the water we drink, the equivalent of a credit card worth of plastic every single week. And so think about that of your children consuming those, if you will, 52 credit cards a year and all the chemicals that are embedded in that plastic, and ask yourself, do we need to thoroughly understand this issue as it affects human health? And certainly I think we have a responsibility to our children, to the generations to come, to thoroughly understand this and address this challenge. 25% of the more than 10,000 chemicals associated with plastics pose potential health or environmental damages, including chemicals that mimic, block, or alter the actions of hormones, that reduce fertility, and that damage the nervous system. Through every stage of its life cycle, plastic can release these toxins. From the petrochemicals used in their production that workers and frontline communities are exposed to the ones that are released through regular plastic use, and finally to the toxins that make their way into the air, the soil, the water when the plastics are thrown away. Now, most of us have heard of the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle. And it sounds like a magical way to address this challenge. But here's the story with plastics. It's not 3 R's, it's 3 B's. They're buried, they're burned, or they're borne out to sea. That's quite a different picture. And then we have the notion that we have recycling bins and we put plastic items into them. And yet very few people know that often those recycling bins are simply combined with the trash in many, many institutions, they're simply kind of a greenwashing. And if they are being brought to recycling operation, only about 9% get recycled. So that means just a fraction of the plastic is recycled. Mostly what you do when you put something into a recycling bin with plastic, you're not recycling, you're wish cycling. You're making a wish and a hope that somehow this plastic will be recycled when it's not going to be recycled. The risks and dangers associated with plastic production and pollution, they're not going away. In fact, they're going to get worse. Plastic doesn't break down, it just breaks up. In the last 60 years, the world has produced more than 8 billion tons of plastic. Over 6 billion tons of that has become plastic pollution, meaning the plastic has been produced, has ended up in the environment, and it's still there forevermore. And the state rate of plastic production is expected to triple over the next 3 decades. It's another reason this committee should be taking a thorough examination of it. We have something that's caused a lot of concern, and yet we're blindly en route to tripling its presence. I think that that's not an acceptable formulation for the accountability that we bear as legislators to the people of the United States. Without serious changes to our recycling systems, such as proper labeling or requirements for companies to use recycled materials in their products, our nation will continue simply to be wish cycling. So that's why we're here this morning, see what options there are, hear from our various folks testifying about approaches. I have introduced the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. It says basically, yeah, well, let's improve our recycling to the degree that that will make a difference. Let's eliminate single-use plastic that's absolutely unnecessary in the first place. Let's use more of producer responsibilities, such as we do with ink cartridges for printers, to have a system in place that ensures far more of the stream of waste actually gets recycled. Let's have a national bottle bill. The bottle bill in states like my state, Oregon, the first in the nation to have a bottle bill, its recycling rate on plastic bottles is up around 90%. Many states, they're closer to 15 or 20% without such a bottle bill. So, we're delighted to have this panel of experts. And now I'd like to turn things over to my colleague and ranking member, Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling today's subcommittee hearing. Today, we're here to consider the impacts of plastic use as well as solutions for reducing plastic waste. I appreciate our witnesses for joining us this morning to discuss this important topic. I want to particularly thank Matt Seaholm, the CEO of the Plastics Industry Association, for being with us today. He'll be able to share with the subcommittee the importance of plastics in our modern economy. They're essential to our economy, and I think both sides of the dais will acknowledge that. He will also discuss steps that industry is taking to respond to concerns, such as the ones the chairman mentioned. Eric Hartz, president and co-founder of Nexus Circular, will be able to share with the committee some of the solutions being developed in the private sector to respond to plastic waste. The production of plastics has been pivotal for a number of advancements in our modern world, particularly for public health and hygiene. This was especially apparent during the COVID-19 pandemic. Frontline workers and many others deemed essential relied on personal protective equipment, or PPE, that often contained plastics. Items such as gloves, gowns, and face shields offered protection for our most vulnerable and hardworking individuals. Single-use plastics were also essential for creating COVID-19 vaccines and tests, two developments that allowed us to return to normal sooner. When considering the use of plastics, we should keep in mind the vast range of benefits that have been provided for public health because of plastics. As with aluminum and other products, the use of more plastics has led to discussions about their production and disposal. Some states and localities, as the chairman has said, have taken steps to encourage shoppers to use reusable bags instead of single-use plastic bags. Several states have established bottle buyback programs, encouraging customers to return their plastic bottles after being used. In addition, recycling and advanced recycling offer promising solutions for dealing with plastic waste. However, lack of demand and contamination issues have kept recycling from realizing its full potential. Access to recycling is a problem. It is limited, if not completely unavailable, in many parts of the country, including rural areas, such as many places in my home state of Mississippi. Congress has taken steps to tackle these issues. We addressed contamination concerns when we included Senator Portman's Recycle Act in the bipartisan infrastructure law. This legislation, which is now in statute, creates a new grant program to fund recycling education with the goal of reducing contamination. We also addressed recycling access issues when this committee and the Senate passed Ranking Member Capito's Recycling Infrastructure and Accessibility Act. This legislation seeks to make recycling easier and more accessible throughout the United States, particularly in underserved areas. Congress also passed Senator Sullivan's Save Our Seas 2.0 Act in 2020, establishing a new grant to support improvements to municipal recycling programs. Advanced recycling is another potential solution for plastic waste. This method of recycling dismantles plastics into their constituent parts, allowing for more materials to be repurposed. Advanced recycling technology can also extend the life of existing materials so that fewer virgin materials have to be used. And notably, this method, advanced recycling, allows many previously unrecyclable plastics to be processed while also dealing with contamination issues. These advancements are important to keep in mind as we look to the future of plastics and continue to work to reduce plastic waste. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We're going to turn now to our witnesses. I'll first introduce Dr. Pete Myers, the founder, CEO, and chief scientist of the Environmental Health Services. We look forward to hearing your testimony. Mr. Myers, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Chairman Merkley, Ranking Member Wicker, Senator Whitehouse, it's an honor to be in front of you today to provide testimony. As you said, my name is Pete Myers, and I'm founder, board chair, and chief scientist of Environmental Health Sciences, a C3 that promotes public understanding of the intersection between health and the environment. I'm also an adjunct professor of chemistry at Carnegie Mellon University and a founder and a board member of Sudoc.com, a chemical company building out sustainable chemistry. So you've invited me here today to talk about plastics and human health. This is right in my sweet spot. I've been doing it for a long time. I'll summarize some of the key concepts in the science and then provide specific examples of where chemicals leaching out of plastics have harmed human health. I can't cover it all in 5 minutes, but because there's so much more, so please look at my written testimony. So endocrine disrupting compounds, which Senator Merkley mentioned, are a key part of this story. They are not the only chemical hazard in plastics, but because they cause harm at such extraordinarily low doses, I will focus on them this morning. What are endocrine disrupting compounds, EDCs? They hack hormone signaling. Hormones are the messaging system that tells genes when to turn on and off. They affect literally all physiological processes throughout our bodies. They make sure the fetus grows up healthy, a healthy adult, and they also work to ensure that healthy adults age well. When hormone signals are hacked, bad stuff happens. That's what endocrine disruption is about. Many chemicals, we are exposed to hundreds of endocrine disrupting compounds throughout our lives, including from plastics. Many chemicals leaching out of plastics are EDCs. That links them to a wide array of today's epidemics of non-communicable diseases like breast cancer, prostate cancer, testicular cancer, infertility, immune disorders, and brain impediments, including ADHD and autism. Toxicity in plastics, you have to understand, it comes from 3 different sources. One is the basic building block of the plastics, what's known as the polymer, what becomes the chain that makes a plastic. So then you have the additives that are infused into the plastic that's composed of the monomer. And these these molecules, like phthalates, alter the material characteristics of the plastic. And finally, you have chemicals that were not intentionally added, and these are really important, but most people are unaware of them. They are the result of impurities in the reagents that are used to make the plastics originally. And those impurities come from many different sources. They often can't be controlled, and it's really expensive to remove them. And if you were to spend the money to remove them, plastic would be much more costly. Most chemicals in plastics have not been tested for safety. None have been tested thoroughly. But if you don't test, you don't know if they're safe. If you don't test, you don't know. That's one of my core messages. You must test. If you take a random sample of plastics from consumer shelves, about 75% of them will show at least one toxic feature, 75% off the shelf. Also, you can't assume that bioplastics are safe. Some are definitely not. You have to test to determine what's safe and what's not. So I've studied endocrine disruption for 30 years. In 1991, I even gave it that name, endocrine disruption. In 1996, I co-authored the first book for the general public about endocrine disruption called Our Still in the Future. Since then, over $1 billion of dollars and euros and yen and renminbi have been invested in EDC research around the world. Tens of thousands of scientific papers have been published in the peer-reviewed literature. We know so much more now than we did in the early 90s.
Please
right?
feel free to hold on for a moment while we figure out what happened to the lights.
I must have said something shocking.
Somebody doesn't like your testimony, apparently. There we go. Now we're all now collectively enlightened. Thank you. Please
Okay.
continue.
Go ahead.
Yes.
What we know now, after all that research, tells us that it's much worse than we thought when this discipline began, much worse. The ubiquity of EDCs in plastic and the abundance of plastic everywhere is a major factor in why it's worse. Let me give you 4 quick examples, or at least start on 4 quick examples before my time runs out. 1, data show that over the last 5 decades, there's been a 50% decline in sperm count in adult men. The original studies only focused on men in the developed world, but just this past month, a new study came out that expanded it to the developing world also. And what it showed is the rate of decline is speeding up. It's not slowing down. It's global. It's not just sperm count. It's also other features of male and female infertility are worsening also. If the current rate of sperm count decline continues, average sperm count will decline asymptotically towards 0 by the 2040s. That's not very far off. Reproducing the old-fashioned way will become much less common. It just won't work. And to add injury to injury, some plastic chemicals interfere with artificial reproduction technologies, which to begin with are quite expensive. So that's 1. 2, brains are being rewired by certain plastic chemicals. This has been proven definitively in animal experiments where you can take the brain apart. Epidemiological studies of kids whose mothers were monitored for chemicals during pregnancy show patterns predicted by these experiments. Not always, but most of the evidence is consistent. ADHD and autism are part of the picture. I'll end with this. One expert in how thyroid hormone is key to proper brain wiring and how EDCs hack thyroid hormone has written that unless the long-term exponential increase in autism is stopped, by 2045, 1 in 2 children born in the US will be on the autism spectrum. Think about what that means for society. I've got several other examples I could go on about why do so many men have trouble peeing in the bathroom as they grow old, or some really interesting work on how chemicals interfere with breast cancer treatment. But I'll stop here and look forward to questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and I do encourage people to read your full written testimony. And we're now going to turn to Ms. Enck. You serve as president of Beyond Plastics and former EPA Regional Administrator for Region 2. The microphone is yours.
Good morning, Senators. What an honor to be with you, and thank you for holding this hearing. It is so timely and so vitally important that we get to solutions. I'm Judith Enck. I use she, her pronouns, former EPA Regional Administrator, founder of Beyond Plastics, and I'm on the faculty at Bennington College in Vermont. On the off chance that you're not riveted by my 22-page testimony today, I want to direct you to page 8 with a great cartoon by Liza Donnelly. There's a guy or a gal looking out the window with their daughter saying, "Someday, daughter, all of this will be yours, and you'll just have to deal." I included that cartoon because it's a reminder of what is at stake, that we cannot leave our kids and our grandchildren with this enormous problem of plastic pollution. There are solutions. I can go on forever with solutions we can grab off the shelf today. There are also false solutions being promoted by the plastics industry, which I hope we can get into, which is chemical recycling or advanced recycling. You all know, you open a package that you order on Amazon, for instance, it arrives really overpackaged, so much stuff you don't need. And in fact, today, the prestigious national group Oceana put out a report on how much plastic packaging is produced by Amazon. Amazon, we need you to do much, much better. Oceana also commissioned a poll. 82% of voters want you to adopt laws to reduce plastics. The poll results were bipartisan: Republicans, Democrats, Independents. When I served at the EPA, I met many people who were climate change deniers. I have never met a plastic pollution denier because the evidence is everywhere. You walk down the street, you see plastic bags in the trees. And I also want to go on the record by saying there are some uses of plastic, but we don't see medical waste hanging from trees. And medical waste, by the way, is a small percentage of plastic production. Cars are more efficient if they have some plastic, making them lighter. I don't see car bumpers in my local park. I see a lot of single-use plastics. This is a climate change issue. My organization did a report called The New Coal, Plastics and Climate Change. We looked at production, use, and disposal of plastics and learned that in the next decade, greenhouse gas emissions from plastics will exceed that of coal. I support recycling. I started my town's recycling program over 30 years ago. Everyone should keep recycling metal, glass, cardboard, aluminum. However, plastic recycling has been an abysmal failure. It clocks in at under 10%. And I quickly want to explain why. If you take a newspaper and you put it in the recycling bin, it can get recycled into a new newspaper. There are many, many different plastic resins. As Dr. Myers said, thousands of different plastic chemical additives in plastics and many different colors. If in your own home, your washing machine probably has on top of it a bright orange detergent, hard plastic. In your refrigerator, you have a clear squeezable plastic. Those two cannot be recycled together. And when the plastics industry says they can use chemical recycling and create new plastics, that's not true. What they're mostly producing is fossil fuel. And that's the last thing we need, is more climate warming fossil fuel. Also, it's just not dealing with the large percentage of plastics that are out there. This is very much an environmental justice issue. Plastics are produced in environmental justice communities, places like Cancer Alley in Louisiana, where there's a concentration of petrochemical facilities. And these communities, typically low-income communities of color, are so overburdened on both the production side and then because so little plastics actually get recycled when it comes to disposal, it's these same communities that are homes to landfills and incinerators. We need to cut plastic production by 50% in the next 10 years. We can do it. Pass the Breakthrough from Plastic Pollution Act, pass the National Bottle Bill, pass a sensible law called the Plastic Reduction and Recycling Act, also known as EPR, which has been introduced in state legislatures around the country. We don't need a magical breakthrough. We need reduction, refill, and reuse. And if you absolutely cannot reduce or refill and reuse, then rely on paper, metal, glass. Get the toxics out, particularly out of the paper, and make sure that that material is made from recycled content and are easily recyclable. Local governments are drowning in plastics that you can't recycle. If you are a fiscal conservative, you should embrace plastics reduction. We've got to be honest. Plastics recycling isn't working. It's having a devastating impact on health in the communities where it's manufactured. Reduction is the way to go. The federal government could start using real dishes in all of its facilities rather than single-use plastics. Schools need funding to install dishwashing equipment to stop serving children on single-use, for instance, polystyrene trays. How about public drinking waters, public water fountains everywhere you go, so you can fill this up rather than wasting your money on plastic water bottles? Funding is key. When you look at infrastructure, I urge you to think about putting funding for states and local governments into a reuse, refill infrastructure. Right now, local governments can't control everything that's coming at them, but packaging companies have choices to make. Are they going to provide sustainable packaging or more and more multi-material packaging that is either littered, buried, or burned? You and I don't want to use so much plastic, but we have little choice, which is why extended producer responsibility with teeth goes a long, long way.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And each of our first two witnesses went 2 minutes over their time, so we'll establish the same possibility should you wish to use it. And we'll next turn to Mr. Matt Seaholm, who serves as CEO of the Plastics Industry Association.
But at 5 minutes, we're going to turn the lights on.
Any distraction is welcome. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Merkley, Ranking Member Wicker, and esteemed members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Matt Seaholm, and I'm the President and CEO of the Plastics Industry Association. Founded in 1937, we represent the entire supply chain of the plastics industry, in which nearly 1 million Americans are employed. Our membership includes material suppliers, equipment manufacturers, processors, and recyclers. Let me first say we appreciate the commitment of this committee to pursue solutions that reduce waste. There's a saying in our industry, we love plastic, we hate plastic waste. The way we see it, any molecule of plastic material that leaves the economy is truly a waste. We need to collect, sort, and ultimately reprocess more material, and that goes for all substrates, not just plastic. But today's hearing is first about the impacts of plastic use. So I'd like to discuss a few of those. More importantly, the variety of people impacted. A husband hit head-on at 50 miles per hour, and even though they had to cut him out of the car with the jaws of life, he surprised even the medics on site as the deployment of airbags made from plastic fibers left him unharmed. A teenager who only has access to nutrition thanks to plastic packaging because he lives in a food desert right here in our nation's capital. A retiree with type 1 diabetes since childhood who remains active because of the sterile, interchangeable plastics used to support decades of treatments through the loss of kidney function. A young family without running water for an entire week because a hurricane flooded their neighborhood along the Gulf Coast, but were not thirsty because of plastic water bottles delivered to them in their time of need. A single mother who, during a crucial time of the baby formula shortage, was able to utilize pre-sterilized plastic milk collection bags to safely store breast milk for her baby. The list can go on, and before it's suggested these aren't the types of applications truly at the heart of the discussion, I would point to three pieces of proposed legislation in this Congress that have called for the stoppage of production of plastics used in each of these scenarios. If there's one thing a pandemic and now war on the European continent has taught us, stable supply chains are imperative. Producing plastic in America is a good thing, and something that I believe should be embraced as essential, not abruptly stopped. Plastic has become a preferred material in most applications because it uses the least number of resources to manufacture and transport, as well as providing greater performance. However, we must also acknowledge that the incredible innovations in plastic materials and products have outpaced our ability to recycle them because infrastructure has not kept up. Our nation's recycling rates are too low. That is why companies across our supply chain work tirelessly to improve recyclability and invest billions of dollars into the prevention of waste and the technologies to recycle. However, our industry does not control the entire value chain of recycling in America, and that is why we need partners to help get these rates where we all want them to go. We see Congress as a very important partner in that process and appreciate this hearing for the opportunity to talk about solutions to reduce plastic waste. A few policy approaches I might suggest: increase investments in critical recycling infrastructure to ensure the collection, sortation, processing can keep up with the complexities of all materials in the marketplace. The EPA has started their process for granting resources included in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that stem from Save Our Seas 2.0 legislation passed in 2020. It's a great start, but certainly more is needed. Promote end market development for the variety of plastic resins to ensure demand remains for recycled materials. Reasonable and attainable recycled content requirements can help spur investment and guarantee markets for recyclable material. Encourage innovations in recycling technologies to ensure materials that cannot economically be recovered through traditional methods can still be recycled, moving us towards a more circular economy. But perhaps more importantly, I urge Congress to avoid stifling innovation and promising new technologies that are absolutely needed. There's already real value in post-consumer plastic. These policies will help us better capture it and keep it in our economy. At the end of the day, plastic is essential, plain and simple. We need it in our lives, but America does not recycle enough of it. Our industry wants to recycle more, and that's why every day we recycle more than we did the day before. Working together, I know we can get these rates up, and together is the most important word in that sentence. I hope that is the spirit of today's discussion. I thank you again for the opportunity to offer testimony on behalf of our industry, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you for your testimony. And I'd now like to introduce our final witness, Mr. Eric Hartz, the co-founder and CEO of Nexus Circular.
Good morning, Chairman Merkley, Ranking Member Wicker, Senator Whitehouse, and other members of the subcommittee. My name is Eric Hartz. I am co-founder and president of Nexus Circular. We are an advanced recycler that transforms used plastics for reuse with the objective of reducing plastic waste. While there are a variety of companies that process used plastics, Nexus Circular is unique, and I'm here to discuss what Nexus does and appropriately what it does not. I appreciate the opportunity to provide information to subcommittee members regarding our real, proven solution to the challenge of used plastics. Nexus Circular is a commercial-scale solution today that handles a wide array of plastics, including hard-to-recycle films that most recyclers cannot. We convert these plastics in one single heating and cooling cycle to produce products that our partners can convert into virgin equivalent plastics using the same equipment they use to produce plastics today. Nexus does this without chemicals, catalysts, water, special treatments, or burning. Since our founding by Jeff Gold, our team has been laser-focused on taking used plastics and turning them into circular products safely, economically, and with the ability to scale in a way that has a positive impact on the environment and the communities we serve. We have an experienced, passionate team that is literate in chemistry, operations, engineering, logistics, safety, and finance. Our philosophy from the start has always been, if our technology is not economical, environmentally friendly, and scalable, then it will fail to provide the solution to the plastics challenge we all seek. The used plastics we accept are not waste. They are materials that have been segregated from the waste stream and are often bound for landfills. We do some light sorting for suitability. We cover a broad array of plastics: polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, and, as mentioned, an expertise in handling hard-to-recycle films. All can be mixed together, and there's no special recipe. We heat the used plastics in the absence of oxygen at 580 to 750 Fahrenheit. At this temperature, the plastics not only melt, but they depolymerize, breaking down at the molecular level, turning into vapors that are then cooled into circular liquids in an entirely closed system. These liquids are then made into new virgin equivalent plastics by our partners. It's also why advanced recycling is referred to as molecular recycling. Because we recycle at the molecular level, these plastics can go through this process again and again indefinitely. Our products and those of our partners represent a true circular plastics economy. There is no burning, gasification, nor incineration, which all occur in the presence of oxygen at much higher temperatures of 1800 to 2700 Fahrenheit. Some mistakenly equate advanced recycling to incineration. Besides being 3 to 4 times hotter, incineration requires oxygen, whereas our process has practically none. Actually, our process would fail with oxygen present since it would not yield sellable circular outputs. Our Atlanta facility operates in compliance with all federal and state laws in an industrial park in Fulton County, Georgia, a Clean Air Act non-attainment area under the purview of the EPA at the federal level and permits from the state of Georgia. We and our partners are ISCC Plus certified and follow audit procedures ensuring all materials are recycled. Our operating footprint is small, so we can site our facilities in similar areas across the nation. Advanced recycling complements mechanical recycling. It does not compete. The recycling hierarchy remains the same: reuse, repurpose, if necessary, mechanically recycle, which is melting and reforming of plastics, now, if able, advanced recycle, which is recycling at the molecular level, and if absolutely necessary, landfill. Further, this is not an either-or solution. It's a both-and, meaning our approach supports both converting used plastics into new ones and finding ways to reduce plastics where merited. The demand for Nexus Circular's output far outstrips supply because plastics producers have set ambitious recycled content goals to meet the demand of their own customers who ultimately down the line make products for consumers. We are proud to provide all of them an environmentally friendly, job-creating approach while concurrently addressing the plastics challenge that impacts us all. In short, our advanced molecular recycling process is an elegant solution to a seemingly intractable problem. It's lights out. But please don't just take my word. We cordially invite all of you, anytime, to visit our commercial-scale operation in Atlanta, just 20 minutes from the airport or downtown. Once you see firsthand what we are doing, how we are doing it, and most importantly, how it differs from what some think, we believe it will clear up any confusion about our approach. Better yet, we expect it will generate true excitement about the potential of providing a real solution to addressing the used plastics problem. Innovation is never easy. And Chairman Merkley, as you appreciate, this is a marathon, and we have started this run together, and we are here to solve it together as well. I appreciate the opportunity to share our on-the-ground experience, and I look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And we'll now have 5-minute rounds of questions, and we might be able to get through a couple rounds if we're fortunate. I encourage you to keep your responses as succinct as you can so that we can get through as many points as possible. Mr. Myers, I'm going to start with you. You made reference to the endocrine disrupting chemicals in plastics. Are plastic producers required by law to inform the public of all the chemicals that are in the different plastics they produce?
Not only are they not required by law, but it would be physically impossible because many of the compounds in plastics are what are called non-intentionally added substances, which get there basically by accident. They get there because they're impurities.
Okay, but in terms of the chemicals that are added deliberately for flexibility, for hardness, for colors, are those required to be disclosed to the public?
To my knowledge, they are not, and it would be a good move if they were required.
Mr. Seaholm, do you support full transparency for the chemicals that are added to the plastics that go into the public realm?
Yeah, we have full faith in the FDA's approval and decision-making process, and that's when it comes to food contact in particular. We never cut corners when it comes to safety.
So you support full disclosure of all the chemicals that go into the plastics that go into the public realm?
Well, I guess it depends on which kind of plastics you're referring to, but if we're talking about food contact, which is really where safety comes first and foremost, I think the FDA approval process is certainly sufficient, and we participate and fully support it.
Okay. I appreciate your point about those things that come in contact with food. But certainly, one of the challenges we have is all the other plastics degrade and have as they become microplastics, as they release chemicals over time. I want to go to the impact that you noted, Mr. Myers, over the question of those specific chemicals that affect human reproduction. During my lifetime, we've seen a big increase in breast cancers, a big increase in prostate cancers, and you noted a 50% decline in male sperm production. Well, most men would kind of, oh, whoa, what's that? Now, are all three of those related to the presence of endocrine disruptors in the products that are released into the public realm?
Those all three are predictable consequences of being exposed to certain endocrine disruptors, but they aren't all three due to the same endocrine disruptor. So it's a very complicated system. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of EDCs, and they all have their unique characteristics of harm.
A few years ago, there was a whole movement across the country saying, well, one in particular, and not being a chemist, maybe I'll mispronounce it, but bisphenol A?
Bisphenol A.
Bisphenol A, or BPA as it came to be called in the public realm. I was like, well, we got to get this out of the lining of our tuna cans. And oh my goodness, how about out of our water bottles too? Has that actually changed by law, or is it just that some makers of water bottles now advertise that they're BPA free?
The one BPA product that has been eliminated by the FDA in the market is baby bottles. But that was done at the behest of the manufacturers of baby bottles because they were getting such bad press from all the big stories about BPA harm. Most products that include BPA have not been removed from the market.
So what about the water bottles that we buy in the store?
Those are largely motivated by marketers, by companies who have an alternative to BPA and want to advertise that they are BPA free. The problem is that the most common is BPS, which is a minor variant on BPA, and subsequent research since that substitution became known has shown it is just as bad, if not worse, than BPA.
So you also mentioned your written testimony, phthalates and perfluorinated compounds. Perfluorinated, is that the same as PFAS?
Yes, it is.
So we have PFAS in plastics, we have phthalates. It's going to exist in the universe for thousands of years to come, and find out how much PFAS is in it or phthalates are in it, because that disclosure is not required, isn't that right?
That disclosure is not required, and disclose in food packaging content, so that the common practice of fluorinating high-density polypropylene with fluorination is not widely known, but is very common.
I have one members that are here to ask questions. Senator Wicker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Myers. Some very startling testimony about male sperm count basically being ineffective by brain wiring, autism being caused by this. Is it your testimony that there is scientific documentation that lower sperm count is being caused by plastic waste?
There is extensive scientific documentation. I would refer you to a book called Countdown by one of the principal the study, which is published in the peer-reviewed literature. But also the book explains what is the basis of the evidence for
And the same for autism.
Yes.
Okay, now, Ms. Inc., is it your testimony that plastic production, pollution? Production, okay.
Yeah, and because of the impact in low-income and minority communities where the production is
How about that? How practical is that? And what do you say to peer-reviewed concerning autism and sperm count?
Well, thank you, Senator. First, on the production question, if elsewhere, the likelihood that it's going to be produced with some sort of better environmental standards is unrealistic. So the best thing for us to do is actually produce the plastic use all day long, but actually stopping the production of it is really going to be
What
detrimental.
about 50% reduction?
Yeah, that's just, it's not attainable, and nor should it be, because it would absolutely cripple supply chains and economic progress in the United States. On your second question, I think Dr. Myers, in his opening, few have been tested thoroughly, and I think to respond to that with, has there been significant scientific evidence? I think for the vast majority of the discussion on chemicals, no. In Senator Merkley's recently introduced bill, there is studies that would be funded for it, and we would welcome studies to be done looking at things like microplastics, because there isn't sufficient claims.
And Mr. Hartz, with regard to your high-temperature procedure that doesn't include oxygen,
Ranking Member Wicker, appreciate the question. So I think first, we're talking about a two-tier problem. Incinerate, and we make a product that's clean and pure enough to run through the current plastics production system. That's the best review you can get. We have a very tight spec we have to meet. And then second,
yet?
we are actually able to scale. We are running a commercial scale operation today, and again, invite anyone in this room to please come visit us and see it. It's very
Ms. Inc., have you visited them, and what's wrong with what Mr. Hart said?
being handled by chemical recycling facilities. Currently, only 0.26% of the plastic waste is handled by this.
Mr. Hartz, what do you say to that?
Without being flip, any innovation has to start somewhere. Low-flow toilets, when they started, had to be produced at small volumes to get to larger ones. The cusp that we're on now, and that's the job we've made about being efficient and environmentally friendly, and that is where we're headed now. So we actually believe our footprint is quite small. We can go near the feedstock. with Ms. Ank. This is a problem that's enormous, and even if we are successful on our own, we're not going to solve it alone. Our cohort needs to solve it together, and there is a way to do that.
An underappreciated threat to wildlife, to the quality of life, and to human health. So I'm really pleased that we're having this hearing to process is very promising. We need to lean in very hard because I'm sick to death of reports coming out of the ocean plastics meetings that the U.S. was the weak link. And with the fact that we are flooding our world with plastics. And there may be no constituency for the albatross here or for other seabirds, but when essentially every caught seabird has plastic in its gut, it's a signal from Mother Nature that we need to pay attention here. I offer anybody the chance to respond to my comments in the way of a response to question for the record. I would flag that in addition to the plastics problem on the land and in the human environment, we also have a really significant ghost fishing gear problem because plastic fishing gear lasts forever, and after people lose it, the long lines keep catching fish, the nets keep catching fish. They are just sort of massacres flowing through the ocean, and we need to make sure that it is very lucrative for a fisherman when they get near ghost gear to haul it out of the water and have that be their catch for the day, because that will help clean up our oceans a lot. And the last thing I think that I'll mention is that we can do a lot more here, and the industry can do a lot more here, particularly if you look at the areas of industry leadership. You know that it's feasible when industry is already doing it. So I was in Norway at the Our Oceans conference when Unilever announced its pledge. It's a major seller of goods, major distributor of plastic and packaging, and they made the pledge that for every pound of plastic that they put out into the economy, they were going to find a pound of plastic in the ocean or in the environment and get it back and dispose of it properly. And to me, at the moment, I think that is the core. Major plastics manufacturer make that exact same commitment, and then we can look on what else needs to be done. But it is, to me, a little bit ridiculous when we have a problem of this magnitude in an industry that is responsible for it, that when the industry sets a high watermark of good behavior, the rest of the industry isn't already there with them right away. So I think we need to take this a lot more seriously. I'm very grateful to Chairman Merkley.
So Senator Whitehouse, we are a both-and solution. We agree that it's a large problem and that we can do it that way. And then secondly, Judith, I think you quoted Mario Bono, and I agree. But zero waste done by millions imperfectly would be great, and regulatorily and other behaviors that we can incent would be great to do that.
Mr. Myers, your 20 seconds.
I think it would be useful if members of the committee, if they are not already familiar with a strategy for sustainability now in implementation in the European Union. It answers a lot of the questions that we've been talking about today now on these issues.
Thank you. Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the witnesses for being here today. And recycling in more general terms and not just focused on plastic. And we see some other industries have been very, for many, many years. I'll use the paper industry as an example of that. Chairman Carper, Senator Bozeman, they are the Senate Recycling co-chairs, and Senator Lummis and Senator Merkley and I are members of that. We also have 2 recycling bills. Some people would say that recycling is kind of a myth and sort of a scam. And so, Mr. Seaholm, in terms of one of the comments that I heard, Ms. Enck, I hope I said that correctly, that, to stop the productions of plastic. And, you look around, I'm sure this sweater probably has some, certainly this has, you can't even look anywhere without seeing plastic somewhere. Is there a movement in your business to even consider this? So let's talk recycling first and then manufacturing.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. No, recycling. Mr. Hartz would probably take umbrage to that as well. But we don't do enough of it. We recognize that. Process. But I got to tell you, I've been to dozens of facilities where they're actually reprocessing the material, and I ask them all the same. There's always availability of material, availability of feedstock. They can't get enough material. That means there's a breakdown in the thousands of hardworking men and women in the recycling industry. Absolutely not a myth, but we have to grow it.
Well, I would say, too, that we've heard this, you said it nicely, we need more materials. Some people say we need more trash. If I look at just computers alone, the old computers that we had back when our kids were going through school, what do you do with all of that? I don't know, Mr. Hart, is that the type of recycling that you're doing? And why is your technique called advanced recycling?
Second question first. I think, thank you, by the way, Senator Capito. Advanced recycling is a nomenclature, I think, that kind of became what it was. The reason I refer to it as molecular recycling, I think that makes it sound maybe overly complex, but the fact that we are operating at the molecular level allows us to be done repeatedly over and over. These plastics can come back. And I share that, in theory, all plastic currently above ground is all we would ever need if we do this properly. And to Senator Whitehouse's point, that doesn't solve the production issue. That doesn't solve the size of the problem. If we can do that concurrently, back to the both and point, I think that would be great. Now, in terms of types of plastic that can go through, there's also some misnomers sometimes. The chemistry is that polypropylene, polyethylene, and polystyrene are the ideal plastics to go through the system, and there's ample amounts. Films are also incredibly difficult for mechanical recyclers. It fouls their equipment. They don't want to see it, which is why we complement what we're doing. But if someone says, gee, we take all plastics, a PET is an oxygenated plastic. You're going to get char, you're going to get benzoic acids, other things that clog your system. PVC has chlorides in it. We have to meet a parts per million specs, so we want to avoid those as well. So you can't just say, gee, we'll take all plastics. But the system is such that we can get the plastics we need, and concurrent with that, build an infrastructure and habit set that allows those plastics to come to us, and we have an answer to the problem.
Well, I would encourage this, I know, what is the percent now of plastics that's recycled? Was that the .026 that you?
5 to 6%.
5 to 6. I'll go back to the paper industry. I think they testified 80%, maybe. I might be wrong on
About
that.
65.
65. So they've been doing a lot longer too. So I think that goes to your point, Mr. Hertz. You got to start small before you can get big. And so I appreciate you all coming in today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So we're checking on our supply stream of senators here. I gather that. And I'm not sure, Senator Sullivan was here. Is he ready to step in? Because Senator Duckworth is not on right now. And Senator Carper is on his way. So if Senator Sullivan would like to step in, if not, I'm happy to ask a question. Senator Carper is here? Okay, great. While we're waiting for Senator Carper to arrive, Mr. Hartz. Hey, here we are, welcome. You have a permit you've sought through Georgia EP Environmental Protection Division to be able to emit hydrochloric acid, is that correct?
I'm not sure when you're saying emit hydrochloric acid. We have a general permit for air, for water, and that may be part of that.
Yeah, it is. And I just want to note that because it has sounded from your testimony like it's a closed loop, nothing escapes. And were you not cited for violations in your emissions in 2 quarters of the last year, 2021?
Actually, it was in the last 2 quarters, and the actual violation by definition was a flow meter on a device. It had nothing to do with the system. We built our system out. We obviously went through all the permitting process. And when they came back and revisited, they actually requested a flow meter on the system, which we rapidly repaired. But I would not consider that a violation of our system as much as a violation, if you will, of a rule about the flow. Again, we were going.
Thank you. Senator Carper is now here, so we'll turn this over to him.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I want to thank our chairman. I want to thank our ranking member, Senator Wicker, for holding this hearing, a really important hearing today. I want to welcome our panel of guests, and I want to thank our ranking member of the full committee, Senator Capito, for her support in not just in discussing this topic, but addressing this challenge. And we thank all of our witnesses again for joining us. As some of you know, this is something I care deeply about, have forever. I'm 75 years old, and I've been working as a private citizen on recycling for, gosh, ever since I was a Lieutenant JG in the Navy a million years ago in Palo Alto, California, during the Vietnam War. And I have never stopped caring about it. Did it as a treasurer of Delaware, congressman, governor of Delaware, and I think we've made real progress in our state then. But I like to run, I like to exercise. One of us like to exercise, and so we have folks who have some great walking paths and not too far from where we live. And there's too much litter everywhere. And it's not just in the areas of part of the state where we live, it's all over our state. It's in other states, it's in neighboring states, it's all over the country. And sometimes people think I would go to run just to pick up recyclables. And the good news is I do, but and I can recycle that stuff. But there's a lot of stuff that I pick up that can't be recycled, and it's just going to end up in a trash in a landfill someplace in my state. Anyway, I'm going to ask Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask unanimous consent to enter for the record a statement, if I could.
I hear no objection.
And I'd like to turn my first to 12 questions. Oh, well, first.
You are the chairman.
I promise you it's not 12. Mr. Seaholm, as a Navy guy, I like your name. Seaholm, that's good. And Mr. Hart's nice meeting with you briefly earlier today. Let me just say, I've heard concerns from the plastics recycling community that increasing the number of chemical recycling facilities in the U.S. could hurt the financial liability of mechanical recycling facilities, as increased demand would restrict access to plastic feedstocks. And this could further reduce our already very low plastic recycling rate. Question, if I could, Mr. Seaholm, for you. Would you just discuss this concern, please?
Sure. Our belief is that it should be an all of the above approach. In order for us to get where we want to go, it should be mechanical and molecular recycling as part of the solution. There are certainly applications that molecular recycling does better in terms of purity in particular, and when it comes to food contact, it is actually presenting us with some fantastic options. So our belief is the demand is going to be there, and we strongly support both types.
All right, Mr. Hartz, if I could, would you identify any backstops that the industry has in place to make sure that as chemical recycling grows, the industry does not take feedstock from the mechanical recycling facilities? And do we need for the government to provide those backstops?
So, Chairman Carper, thank you again for your questions. So in terms of backstops, I was mentioning earlier that mechanical recycling is actually less work, if you will. There's some heat, you cut plastics up, you reform them. And there's a lot of plastics that can go there, and those are not the plastics we seek. So we do not see ourselves going after the plastics, and the numbers we hear, 5 to 8% are mechanically recycled today, and there's a reason for that, because those are the ones that work. So the other materials that are flowing by, those are the ones that we're interested in, and particularly we're interested in those plastic films. The other part is the economics of this. It's generally just cheaper to mechanically recycle. You shouldn't be doing advanced recycling if you can mechanically recycle, and we actually support that. So the backstop is going to be the marketplace that allows for that to happen. If we find ourselves in a situation that we're all going after the same material, then to Senator Whitehouse's earlier point, we're not solving the problem in the first place.
All right, thank you. Mr. Seaholm, back to you. If last fall, I think it was last fall, we held a roundtable series and a committee hearing on the concept of a circular economy. We heard from stakeholders from a variety of industries and organizations, as well as state and local governments, about what it would take to transition to an economy that values and promotes circularity at every step of the industrial process, including in the plastics industry. Senator Merkley's bill, the Break Free from Plastics Act, includes several policies that are designed to help reduce plastic pollution, as you know. And my question, would you elaborate on why the plastic industry has advocated for recycled content mandates, extended producer responsibility laws, and bottle bills to be implemented together? And could you explain how these policies can interact with one another to improve overall plastic recycling rates?
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. Everything you just described really falls into two categories. One is demand, and the other is supply. And recycled content requirements done reasonably actually can help spur investment in the infrastructure side of things, because the demand is guaranteed to be there. So increasing demand is most important for the value to be ensured. And then on the extended producer responsibility component of it, the industry has come to a point of accepting a fee on products in order to fund recycling infrastructure, because at the heart of the matter is the infrastructure has simply not kept up, and that's what we have to fund.
All right, good. My time's expired. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Ang, I have a question I'm going to submit for the record, and if you would take the time to respond to it regarding turning plastics into fuel, should not be considered recycling on that particular issue. So if you respond, I would appreciate it. And Mr. Wise, I'm going to pick that.
Can I just say no and then respond for the record?
If you could, that'd be great. Ms. Wise, we look forward to having a question for you the next time, when maybe later today. Thank you so much. And Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for a timely and important hearing. And for those on our committee that have worked on this as well, you know who you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Carper. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and greetings to our witnesses on this very important topic. So appreciate you holding the hearing, Mr. Chairman. And Senator Whitehouse mentioned already the work that he and I have been doing for a number of years now on the Save Our Seas Act, Save Our Seas 2.0, and following up on that. So we'll continue to work it. One of the reasons this is so important to me in my state is on the ocean debris issue is Alaska has more coastline than the rest of the country combined. A lot of people don't know that. And We have a very important fishing industry where we care deeply about sustainable fisheries and healthy fisheries. 2/3 of all seafood harvested in America, commercial, sport, recreational, subsistence, comes from Alaska, 2/3. So these are big issues for my constituents and my state. One question I want to ask all four of the panelists is this issue, at least for remote communities like mine in remote states. We do these big beach cleanups of ocean debris and waste. NOAA estimates that after the Japan tsunami, some of the worst affected beaches in Alaska had 30 tons of waste per mile. So we get this enormous amount of waste and plastic in. Senator Whitehouse point, derelict fishing gear that winds up on our shores. Mostly it's from Asia, not from Alaska. But once the marine debris is collected, there's no place to put it. Most landfills in Alaska can't accept it, so we have to then ship it to the lower 48. By the way, it's the same issue with PFAS. We ship PFAS to Oregon. None of this makes sense, particularly when most building materials that we get in Alaska are imported, mostly from Asia. So the technology now exists to have a local solution, convert some of this plastic waste into components for building materials. So that's just one idea. Given this situation in Alaska and other remote communities, how would you help us solve this problem? Because it's a big problem for my state, but I'm sure it's a big problem for other states as well. And why don't we just go down the line, starting with you, Mr. Hartz?
Sure. Senator Sullivan, thanks for your question. And actually, I share your concern as well. I'm an avid outdoor person, and I see the same things that you do. I think at the end of the day, it's a question of aggregation of plastics. I think the statistics you're talking about are very concerning. But what we have found is when you have a good answer to a problem, like water, it finds the lowest point. So even today, we have materials usually within 150, 250 mile radius that we source from, but we actually have materials coming much further away to us because they say they cannot find a place to properly recycle it, and we can.
Right.
So to your point, I think it's getting the right answer out there that will attract the plastics we need. And frankly, it'll motivate all of us if there's an answer. So that is how we approach it.
And to be able to do it in places that, aren't big cities and stuff like that, right?
So we actually have a relatively small footprint, but you can't go against the gravity of economics. So often you have to have a certain scale, but it doesn't have to be oversized. We've designed our operations to be a smaller footprint because it's better to be closer to the feedstock because there's less density, if you will, than the material we produce, which is easier to then to transport to make new plastics.
Great, thank you. Mr. Seaholm, how about you?
Yeah, I think everything that Mr. Hartz just referenced on the economies of plastic and recycling, I would agree with 100%. In addition, I would say that accessibility is an important issue across the entire country. We want to make it as easy as possible for that waste to get to where it needs to be, but a lot of times that's the consumers getting it into the stream. And Senate Bill 3742 by Senators Capito and Senator Carper is something we wholeheartedly support in order to increase accessibility for rural communities. But without a doubt, in those situations, especially with marine debris, by all means, let's figure out the best way to get it to where it needs to go.
Good. Ms. Zhang?
Hi, Senator. So scientists tell us that within the next decade, for every 3 pounds of fish in the ocean, there'll be 1 pound of plastic. Once it's in the ocean, it's virtually impossible to get it back. Most of it falls down to the sea floor, not the surface. The solution is making less plastic.
Right, no, I know, but
And you-
I just want to give you if you can answer my question that I posed to you, which is, hey, we collect a lot, we got to ship it. What do you think? So I understand, I've seen your testimony, but my direct question, if you can try to answer that, that's the reality my state deals with today. And our Save Our Seas Act tries to deal with this, but I just want, you guys are the experts, so I want, if you can just answer that question. And Mr. Chairman, sorry I'm going over, I know, I just want to see if they have a quick answer.
Well, there's very little you can recycle. I mean, I started my town's rural recycling program in upstate New York. There's just so much. So if you're collecting all of this, the only thing you can do, which is a bad option, is shipping it to a distant landfill or even worse, a garbage incinerator.
Okay, Dr. Myers?
You describe a really important issue and challenge to us, because when I think about using marine plastics as building material, I think about what happens when that building burns. That means the people living in it or working in it will be exposed to very serious toxins. And I don't know what the solution is, but I know that we can't contribute to tomorrow's problems with solutions today that ultimately don't make sense.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, thanks. I have additional questions I'll submit for the record.
Thank you very much, and I'll follow up with you. And I think the point you're making is that the landfills that you're shipping to are because you can't open similar landfills in Alaska. I'd be happy for you to open those landfills in Alaska and not ship it to Oregon.
Yeah, we ship PFAS contaminated soil to Oregon,
Yeah,
and we could do it in Alaska, right?
more discussion to come.
Okay.
And maybe if we can keep the PFAS out of products to begin with, that would be helpful as well. Senator Ernst.
Thank you very much, Chairman Merkley, and to, as well, Ranking Member Wicker for having this subcommittee hearing. This is a very important topic, I think, for all of us. I'm really grateful for the work that has been done on the Save Our Seas. Iowa does not have seas, but we care about it as well. So, Mr. Hartz, let's start with you. Some of the opponents of advanced recycling have called it basically an unproven technology that is unable to operate at scale. Can you talk a little bit about some of the investments that you see being made in advanced recycling?
So thank you, Senator Ernst. Appreciate it. I was talking earlier that we're here really to talk about Nexus in terms of how the industry goes, but we are inviting anyone to come see what we're doing. So in terms of showing scale and showing something that's commercially viable, our plant in Atlanta is that. It's not a lab scale, it's not a pilot scale, it's a commercial scale plant. So we ourselves have, through sweat equity as well as financial investment, built a plant that's doing just that and are now looking to proliferate that. But you are correct, there are other investments being made elsewhere. The term advanced recycling is kind of an umbrella term, and you can have various types of technologies under that. And we always push that economic and environmental footprint come first. The technology could work great, but if it can't scale in those ways, and I feel like a little bit like a broken record, and I apologize, but that is how innovation happens. So that is where the investments are being made. And like any new industry, there are going to be successes and failures. And that's also kind of what we do here in this country, is try to create new things that way.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because it's just as Senator Solon was saying. I mean, we have this problem. It's here. It's now. We can't just look towards the future with maybe not having different types of plastics out there, but we have to deal with what we have now. So I appreciate that. Can you also talk, Mr. Hart, about the environmental standards and safeguards that your particular facility in Georgia operates under?
Sure. So we are in a non-attainment area. We're under federal purview by the EPA. We also obviously have state permits as well. We meet all air, water requirements, and we actually, in some areas, are permit by rule. Our footprint is actually smaller. If non-attainment areas, you're well aware, is very tight. We're actually tighter beyond that still. And then we also manage very carefully. We try, like I said earlier, to keep a closed system. Of course, you're always going to have potentially, at valve points, you're going to have some VOCs that may get out. You manage for that as well. But we're very diligent about that because, again, if we can't prove the point, this is not going to grow. And we'll be here trying to discuss regulation otherwise if we're not doing our job right.
Okay, very good. So I'm from Iowa, wonderful home state. Eddyville, Iowa is home to construction of the world's first bio-BDO facility. Geno's technology will power the core and Cargill facility to produce bio-BDO single-use plastics, in addition to electronics, apparel, auto parts, and other consumer goods. And notably, compared to conventional BDO produced using fossil fuels, bio-BDO offers 90% greenhouse gas emissions savings. Bio-BDO is not only better for the environment, but producing it in the U.S. also supports our local farmers that right there in Iowa. When the Eddyville facility comes online and in active production, it will process about 30,000 bushels of corn every single day, which is great for our farmers. Mr. Seaholm, what role do you see the bioeconomy playing in furthering this type of innovation with bio-based plastic products?
Sure. So thank you, Senator. Similar to my previous answer, it's an all of the above. There are opportunities to use all sorts of different types of original feedstock, and bioplastics are a growing part of the marketplace. We have members who are in the bioplastics division, and we strongly support bio as an option, especially for many of the restaurant-type applications where you have compostable streams, and it does present a good opportunity.
Very good. And then what have been the, for you as well, what have the consumer and markets reaction to these types of alternatives been?
I think it's been great. I think everybody is looking to use an environmentally beneficial product. And I always say people don't feel guilty when they use plastic. They feel guilty when they're done using plastic if they feel like it doesn't ultimately go where it's supposed to go. And that's why recycling is so important. And the same thing goes for bio-based. If it goes into a compostable stream, fantastic.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, we wish great success to our folks in Iowa, and congratulations to our farmers that engage in this. I'll yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to our witnesses.
Thank you very much. So a few decades ago, a scheme was developed regarding triangles printed on products with different numbers representing the different basic types of plastics. And the idea was that, if we know the basic category of each plastic, each article can be grouped accordingly, and then an appropriate system can be found to recycle it. We now hear that this system basically doesn't work. How many plastic forks do you put into your system, Mr. Hartz?
Excuse me, Chairman Merkley, how many plastic
Forks, utensils.
I would not know the answer to that.
Isn't the answer none?
No, sir. Forks can be made from polypropylene. They can be made from other plastic materials. So.
Sure, but you have an industrial stream feeding your plant, and forks are contaminated with food, and so they go into the garbage bin, not even into the recycling bin.
Actually, Chairman Merkley, we do actually take consumer-type materials as well. It's not a large part of our stream, but we do take materials from grocery stores, for instance. We also we are part of the energy bag program, and we handle it that way too.
Okay, I'm going to have some questions for you, for the record, because I'm probably the only person up here who's actually visited a chemical recycling site. And in this site, they said, hey, we have a particular stream that we need to take advantage of because we know what those chemicals are. We know what we're going to reduce. The purchaser of the oil that they were producing wants to make sure they know what that stream is. And if you go down to the cafeteria down below here, you'll find that every piece of plastic that touches food is directed to be put into the waste stream, not into the recycling stream. And if you follow the recycling stream, it's probably dumped in with the rest of the garbage as well, as opposed to actually sent anywhere. So one of the questions I'll ask you is exactly how many pounds of forks or straws or plastic lids, because that model does not fit with what I witnessed when I visited a chemical recycling site. And I think another interesting piece of that puzzle is going back to these triangles. Ms. Enck, why has the triangle system fallen apart? Why does it not work?
Well, it was originally created just to identify the resin, and it doesn't work because plastic recycling is a failure. It's only 5 to 6% recycling. So consumers are always flipping it over. The numbers seem to get smaller and smaller. You really should only put number 1 and number 2 into your recycling bin. That leaves the majority of plastics as non-recyclable. It's even worse when companies put the iconic recycling logo on their packaging, a plastic bag, film, and that'll contaminate the waste stream. In fact, the California Attorney General Rob Banta has launched an investigation around deceptive advertising around plastic recycling. So people want to recycle. Americans, really want to get it going. But other than bottle bills, where you have the deposit, the material is kept separate, you get a high recycling rate. Other than plastics from bottle bill states, plastics recycling is a dead end. We should just call it that and move on to reduction.
Mrs. Enck, I went to a hardware store recently, and I needed to buy a hammer. I don't know where I misplaced my hammer. I'd had it for 40 years, but I lost it. And I was fascinated to see that a hammer, which is designed for beating up on things, was wrapped at the hardware store in a plastic bag. Are we not using plastic in all kinds of settings where it's absolutely unnecessary?
Yes, and it's because the company that packaged it has no skin in the game in terms of what happens to it after you buy the product. They will use different materials. They're not thinking in a circular way. So that's why we need strong, some call it extended producer responsibility. I call it packaging reduction and reuse requirements. Just like we have fuel efficiency standards for cars and appliances, we need environmental standards for packaging so things are not so overpackaged.
So I recently was given a gift box from a wonderful company, not from my home state, and it had a nice little jar, a glass jar of peanut butter and a couple of jams in it, and all nestled into this beautiful little nest of straw. And I thought, that's really cool. And I picked up the straw, and underneath it was plastic noodles. And I thought, so why are these plastic noodles in here? It didn't go with the whole theme of the this nice package. And I noticed that in a variety of packaging, as we more and more of us order things online or brought into the kind of the Amazon-esque, you see a lot of different packaging coming in your front door. And I've noticed in some settings, various strategies for corrugated cardboard to replace what was previously either styrofoam or plastic noodles. Is it possible to pack most things without using plastics?
Yes, New York State has banned polystyrene for food packaging and also banned the little polystyrene peanuts. And we're doing okay in New York, not getting massive amounts of polystyrene peanuts with our packaging. Another world is possible, but it was because the state legislature adopted a law. The voluntary initiatives just are not working.
So we have interstate commerce, and producers tell me, we want consistency as we move our products from state to state. Does New York doesn't ban products from out of state that are packed in plastic noodles, right?
No, the industry is doing just fine.
But my point is that your state can change what you produce, but you can't change what you receive.
Oh, no, it includes shipping into the state. You're prohibited from using plastic peanuts in shipping.
So this company that I was just referring to that does these gift packages and ships them all over the nation, it's actually illegal for them to ship to New York?
Correct. I doubt there's an enforcement action being taken, but they are out of compliance with the New York law.
Wouldn't it make more sense for us to support the producers by not having a 50-state pattern and actually having packing rules that support replacing plastics with corrugated cardboard or so forth, rather than doing it state by state?
We would welcome that, as long as, yes.
Well, I do hope we'll continue in this subcommittee to examine these issues, because it seems like there's a lot that can be done apart from plastics disappearing. It's been pointed out in the panel today that there are advantages for plastics in medical gear, that there are advantages in certain other settings, perhaps in lighter weight automobile components or compression zones that makes cars safer, and I'm sure one could find an additional list, including in medical vaccine applications that have been mentioned and so forth. But I think it also becomes clear from the testimony that there's a whole lot of plastic that is absolutely unnecessary to have in our economy. And I have received interest for bottlers and saying we know that our plastic bottles, we'd like get a bad rap, we'd like to see some recycling. I sat in 1976 on a Senate debate on the floor of the Senate where Senator Hatfield had a national recycling bill based on the Oregon bottle bill. And of course it was ferociously opposed. But I think we're at a different point in starting to understand the impacts of plastic on human health and on the health of animals in our environment. And there is no way to get those microplastics out of the ocean. Those that Senator Sullivan was concerned about, many of us are concerned about. The idea that we now have plastics inhabiting basically like anywhere you test, you find microplastics. We're starting to be aware that microplastics are produced including by washing our clothes and plastic fibers being flushed into our streams. And Mr. Myers, you brought your scientific knowledge of the impact on human health, reproductive health. And I read that in detail in your extended testimony, and I encourage others to do so as well, because the more you read about it, the scarier it gets. And if I read your testimony correctly, you noted that because of the way that these chemicals disrupt the way genes are turned on and off, that in studies of animals, that even after a second generation, where the DNA itself, the gene order has not been changed, but you see the impacts of these endocrine disruptors having changed how the genes are turned on and off, affecting health, so that even a child of a child, if you will, could potentially, in theory, if in animal studies. Did I understand this correctly, that there are effects that persevere beyond just the immediate health effects of the individual?
You read correctly, and thank you for doing that. That phenomenon is called transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, and it's now been seen in multiple types of organisms. Lots of laboratory experiments have established it clearly. We don't know the detailed mechanisms by which it works, but it definitely works. And in animal experiments, we see effects down 4 generations, and it's too expensive to do tests on the 5th generation.
Mr. Seaholm, I know that you professionally represent the plastics industry, but when you hear about plastics appearing in human breast milk, and when you're aware of the impacts of endocrine disruptors as chemicals, do you have any concerns at all about the impacts of plastics on human health?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said earlier, the most important thing that our members, especially those manufacturing anything that's going to come in contact with the human body, care about is safety. If they don't have a safe product, they don't have a sustainable business. So safety is at the forefront of everything they do.
And you've mentioned recycling. Is your industry supportive of a nationwide strategy such as a bottle recycling bill to try to greatly reduce the amount of bottles? Can we hold up that picture behind me again of those bottles that were in the Anacostia River? I mean, this is not something like, this is not rare. I could take you out tomorrow and show you, this is a couple years ago. We'd find the same thing. It's in our streams, it's being flushed out, it's becoming microplastics. Would your industry support a national recycling bill for bottles?
It's specific to bottles?
Well, and I say that because it's considered one of the easier things to do.
Yep.
Like the plastic's more consistent about what's put into those bottles. States that have a bottle bill like mine have they basically recycle all the bottles that come through the system. Clubs make, the kids' clubs collect the bottles in blue bags and submit them, and they raise money for their Boy Scout troop or their swimming club or whatever. Like it works. So we have a model that works, and it's a more consistent form of plastic than the huge variety of things that have different hardeners, different other colors, additives, and so forth. So it's considered kind of like the lowest fruit. Yep. And so that's why I'm asking, on this lowest fruit, would you support a strong strategy to reach a very high level of national bottle recycling?
There's no doubt that bottle bills work. Bottle deposits work. We've seen it. And would the industry support a bottle bill crafted correctly? I think it would certainly be open to that on a national scale. Again, crafted correctly.
Well, I guess the details matter, and but if crafted correctly means that we recycle a high amount, certainly my door is open. Would like to work with you all. And Mr. Hartz, when you hear about plastics being in breast milk and that some of the ingredients have these hormone disrupting impacts, and there's a close correlation and perhaps causation, according to various studies, of these chemicals' impact on human health reproduction, be it prostate cancer, breast cancer, low sperm counts, and so forth. Do you share that concern? Is that concern a part of what has propelled you into the business you're in now of trying to find a solution?
Chairman Merkley, I kind of smile when you ask the question. It's the whole reason we got into this. You know, all the team has had a history of wanting to address these kind of issues, and this particular one, the facts bear out. I think there are two threads of discussion here. One is the problem of plastics as, frankly, you're defining it, but there's also the benefits. And I'm not here to defend or not what the benefits are, but that is a thread of discussion that needs to be addressed. Then there's the solution, and that's what I'm trying to offer today, is a real solution to that issue. So absolutely, I'm concerned about these things. And to your earlier point, just for clarification, we do tolerate reasonable amounts of contamination, because you can't expect a clean stream of plastics to come in. We live in a very complex world. So I just want to share that we do see those things, and we try to work with that. And again, invite you anytime to please come by and see us, because there are different ways to do this.
I thank you. Yes, Mr. Myers, and did you?
Thank you. I want to return to something I mentioned briefly, the chemical strategy for sustainability in Europe. And one of the key concepts they are introducing is the importance of distinguishing between essential uses of plastic and uses that are not essential, and using that as a priority way to decide which ones are you going to work first to reduce. And once you reduce those, then you can focus on the other types of plastics that are essential and find other ways to do the same thing that aren't plastic. So Europe is thinking very logically and very big about how to approach this question.
Okay, essential versus non-essential. Mrs. Zink.
On chemical recycling, Senator, I think it's important for you to know that the American Chemistry Council has gotten 20 states to adopt laws to exempt chemical recycling from some important environmental laws at the state level, and then secondly, looking for public subsidies. I don't think it's a solution. It's not going to solve the problem. I think we may have heard breaking news from Mr. Seaholm on a national bottle bill. We need a national bottle bill. If you just look at PET plastic beverage bottles, in the 10 states that have bottle bills, the PET recycling rate is 63%. Without a deposit, it's only 17%. Bottle bills not only prevent litter,
But
but
those
they
percents
work.
again, for the bottle bills that the states that have it, the recycling rate is?
So bottle bill states for PET, if you have a deposit, 63% recycling rate, no deposit, 17% recycling rate. So having the plastics industry support a national bottle bill and getting the details right would be really helpful.
Are you going to go on to say Oregon's one of the highest recyclers?
Oregon and Michigan, because you've had it a long time. I understand you championed it when you were in the state legislature there. Having a 10-cent deposit rather than 5 cents really works. And then it's crucial to make it easy for consumers. If you pay the deposit, you should be able to return the container to the store. The redemption centers and the depots are nice supplements to return to retail, but I'm super busy. In New York, I return my containers right to the supermarket where I shop. It is easy.
I'll tell you that Oregon, it's much harder to return to stores now. However, there is an interesting model that has been developed by the state of green bags and blue bags. So you take and you get these green bags, unless you're a nonprofit, and you put a quick response code
Right,
on the
we've got that,
sack. When the sack's full, you throw it through the door at the recycling center, and it is then automatically sorted by computers that take a picture of all the bottles that were in that bag, immediately credits your bank account, and does the same for nonprofits. Much easier than sticking one bottle at a time through a hole and having a machine try to register it and have the machine break down and all the other challenges. But I think we should explore the best strategies from around the country, what works and what doesn't. I think Maine is also very high and sometimes beats Oregon, and I'm told that's because they recycle liquor bottles, which we do not. But more work to be done. But I think at least we need to take the pieces of this where we can find some common ground and move forward while recognizing that will help, but it will only modestly help against the massive amount of plastics that's finding its way into being burned overseas. We were shipping a ton of plastics overseas where it was often burned for power. China now says we don't want that anymore. It was so polluting. Thank you very much. That disrupted a lot of the strategies that we had here. So we got a lot of work to do on this, and I appreciate you all bringing your insights and perspectives to bear. And with that, I need to read the formal comments for adjourning. So I'd like to ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a variety of materials that include letters from stakeholders and other materials that relate to today's hearing. I hear no objections. So ordered. Additionally, senators will be allowed to submit written questions for the record through the close of business on Thursday, December 29th. We'll compile the questions, send them out to all of you. We ask that you try to get replies in by Thursday, January 12th, in the new year of 2023, a year in which we'll all dedicate ourselves to making our communities, our states, our country, and the world a better place. And with that, I adjourn the last hearing of 2022.